This is the most important episode we have ever done. With me today, along with Tyler Studt, who was formerly with a child rescue operation, we have Kim Kelley from Digital Defenders United, and her sole purpose is to build awareness in our society about this overwhelming problem that generates approximately $56 billion a year. $56 billion a year are spent on the exploitation of child sex abuse material and also child sex trafficking. It is such an honor to have you with us today. Kim Kelley, tell us a little bit about yourself and your mission.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you. So, I come from a place of deep ingrained passion. Unfortunately, I was born into and raised in this environment. It was actually an international cult where there was many forms of bad things and cult abuse, including trafficking. So I escaped that hell when I was 20 years old. And unfortunately, of course, it wasn't just me, it was about 25,000 other children, mostly American children, all born and raised all around the world. And trafficking was one of the many forms of abuse. So I understand this issue profusely. And I'm also one of the few who refuse to observe it and allow it to continue. Like you said, it's not only the fastest growing and the second largest criminal enterprise, it's so massive, yet so many people are so unaware. And there have been a lot of conspiracy theories spun around it that make people disregard the truth or assume it's some sort of political talking point. So, among many things, I'm here to change that. Over the last few years, I've worked with various nonprofit organizations as well as local and federal law enforcement and other experts in the tech and cybersecurity spaces to really understand this issue and also to assist the people that are making a meaningful impact. So I've worked with different projects, both acting undercover as an undercover junior decoy in these operations with law enforcement, where we are essentially the bait. We pretend to be children on the internet in order to identify and intercept these predators. I've also worked with people building survivor centers for children who have been trafficked. I've done law enforcement consulting as well as working on various investigations, both undercover and directly. And it's been a very interesting journey, to say the very least. So while I'm passionate about awareness, because it's not just talking about it, it's about helping people understand the real problems and the real solutions. It's also about reducing the predator's ability to operate, which is what awareness does. It makes it harder for bad guys to get away with doing bad things to children when we, the people, are aware. But then there's also the what can we do about this? How can we make it stop? How can we at least reduce this nasty enterprise? How can we make people wake up and take this seriously? So there's this poetic justice in not only the trauma that I was raised in and was able to overcome, but in the way that I get to fight back now. And I have a very healed perspective on that. I also have a real dark sense of humor, so I tend to laugh and smile about some things that are really dark. But it's my chosen form of healing as well as release. It's also because I have such an intolerance to this evil and I'm not afraid of it. I've overcome this darkness. It's not something that any of us should fear. And it's definitely not something any of us should be allowed to ignore. So I know that sometimes my petite physique and my smiley face is able to reach people that would otherwise not hear it or at least be compelled by this message. So my call to action ranges from every politician, law enforcement officer, down to every single citizen. There's something all of us can do to be part of the solution. In my opinion, we have a responsibility to not only end this, but to do something about this, both for the existing children that are suffering from the things people cannot even imagine, as well as prevent generations to come from experiencing this type of trauma.
After getting to listen to you speak for 90 minutes on this topic, I can say without a doubt that you are just a blinding light in a landscape of darkness and depravity. And whatever deep, dark holes these vipers bury themselves into, they will be routed out by your light. And I pray that this message gets out to all the right people. And I truly hope that everyone listens to every second of this show because Kim is such a valuable asset in this fight. And these type of interactions are what is going to build social consciousness and awareness of the greatest problem of our time. This is it. So enjoy the show, everyone. Here we go.
So, when we're talking about what is child trafficking and how big of a problem it is, we first need to define what is trafficking. We're talking about the sale and exploitation. Human trafficking, as we know, is a massive global problem. Narrow that down to the United States. Most people don't understand the United States is actually the biggest problem. We're the main source and destination for human trafficking. Now, of the various ways that humans can be trafficked, narrow that down to children. Labor trafficking, domestic servitude, various forms of trafficking can incorporate this nasty spectrum of intensity. We're also talking about the severity, the duration, and other ways that can make it worse. Narrow that down to child sex trafficking, children being sexually exploited and sold, somebody profiting from that sexual exploitation. In the United States alone, child sex trafficking generates at least $50 billion every year. That's more than all professional sports combined every single year in the United States. Tell me how many children that is. For further context, McDonald's and Costco generate less than $25 billion each every year. Imagine how many children in the United States alone are being sexually trafficked and exploited. Now, another common misconception is that the majority of trafficked children are kidnapped. Unfortunately, that's actually the minority, and the majority of these instances are never reported. Unfortunately, familial trafficking, families trafficking their own children, is the number one form of child trafficking in the United States. So when we approach this issue, we have to understand what the problem really is so that we can accurately tailor our strategy to be effective against it.
So when you talk about Costco and you go to Costco on a Saturday and you see all those people there and you think about how many locations nationwide Costco has and all these millions of people that have their Costco memberships and stand in line in these crowded stores, what you're saying is that Costco and McDonald's combined generate 25 billion annually?
I believe it's each. McDonald's will be
Okay.
Costco might have 24, but
So
that volume worldwide in the entire world generate less than $25 billion.
So you think
Some
about that amount of customers, right? So we have an
and
industry
products.
that is profiting on adult men who pay money to rape children repeatedly, and it generates more money than Costco and McDonald's annually.
Yes. It generates more money than Costco and McDonald's combined. It generates more money than every type of professional sport. So we see the events and the marketing and the merchandise, and it would be hilarious if anyone came up to you and called sports a theory, because the difference is that we see it. Now, I know I'm oversimplifying something that is quite complex, but because we see it, we are very aware of the volume, and no one would call that a theory to your face. Now, imagine being a survivor of the unimaginable, and people still don't want to believe it's real because it's too dark, scary, gross for them to comprehend. Now, the good news is, unless you're evil and psychotic, you cannot compute the mind of someone who would not only exploit and abuse a child, but then profit from that exploitation. However, just because we cannot comprehend it, just because there's no logical reason for someone to do that, or because someone's privileged enough that it never happened to them, does not mean it's not happening to countless children around the world, and specifically in our country. I was born and raised in an environment where there were daily forms of abuse, including trafficking. We were around 25,000 children, mostly American children, born and raised and trafficked all around the world. We were never reported. We were never rescued. We were never part of the statistics you'll never read. I want people to realize this is real. It's not a theory. And any sort of verified data is only scratching the tip of the iceberg.
So you look at Hollywood and MK Ultra and Operation Mockingbird, that is all Freedom of Information Act declassified. You look at the lyrics and music, you look at the scripts and plots of movies, you look at professional sports and gambling and porn and all these apps that just waste people's time and causing brain rot. You look at all of the psychiatric medications and sleeping pills and alcohol abuse and all of the stresses of life that the average American does when they're inching along in traffic on the way to a job they can't stand Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. How does someone like that even entertain the idea that this kind of darkness and depravity could be happening in the land of the free and home of the brave?
So here's a series of rhetorical questions that I like to ask because I'm not here to tell people what to think. I'm here to help them unpack the logic for themselves. Here's one of many. Out of all the three-letter agencies that our tax dollars fund and all the things that they do, tell me to my face why we don't have a federal agency that is dedicated to combating human trafficking. Tell me to my face whether that's intentional or is it incompetence? Now, either way, it's unacceptable. But you know how with the war on drugs, right? There's been efforts and they're making noise about it and they're laundering money and getting votes, but they're pretending to care, right? So the rhetorical question is, why are they not even pretending to care when it comes to human trafficking? Unfortunately, the answer to all these rhetorical questions is that it's at least a $50 billion criminal enterprise, and it's the second largest criminal enterprise on the planet. Get real passionate about this, and I am not apologizing. It's also the fastest growing. The sale and exploitation of children in the United States is the fastest growing criminal enterprise on the planet. It is possibly catching up to drugs and arms. Now, why aren't they pretending to care? Let's unpack that question. Because who would not care about children? If your goal is to get votes, because let's be real, politicians talk, right? Why would they not even add that to their sales pitch? Why would they not even pretend to care or pretend to have a plan or pretend like they're going to do something about it? Because I'm not here to pretend like the federal government would actually be effective at creating a task force or an agency that's dedicated to combating human trafficking. And all I'm saying is that they're not even pretending to care, and people should ask themselves why.
May I give you two words that should provide the answer and a rabbit hole that people need to jump in head first?
Go for it.
Franklin cover up. Former
Franklin
FBI
scandal.
Assistant Director Ted Gunderson was very outspoken in the late 80s and early 90s about a large scale operation that was not only known by a certain three-letter agency, but it appears that many of these individuals were complicit in operating trafficking organizations that were transporting minors to high level politicians, celebrities, billionaires, all the people that are pulling the strings and running the show in the banking and finance industry. And we did not have the internet back then. So there many people do not know what Ted Gunderson was talking about. He did write a book called The Franklin Cover Up. His evidence is bulletproof. It is irrefutable. This is real. It just so happens that Mr. Gunderson died under very suspicious circumstances. My question to both of you is how many of our politicians are not being blackmailed because they were caught on a hidden camera doing something horrific to a child?
I like how you said how many are not blackmailed. So, again, with the rhetorical questions that I love to ask, another one is how many politicians have ever talked about child sex trafficking, made some sounds with their mouth on those screens that we watch? More importantly, why has the topic of child sex trafficking never been mentioned on a presidential debate stage? That's more relevant now than ever, but I've been saying that for years. And as you can tell, I've overthought this. There are less than 10 politicians of the hundreds that we fund with our tax dollars. There's less than 10 politicians making noises with their mouth to even pretend to care or talk about it or pretend like they have a plan to solve this. Now, once again, they work for us. Here's let me flip the script. Why are we the people allowing that? So while I'm not here to try to let these guys off free and their responsibility, let's look at this a different way. If we were the owners of a large corporation and our management team was failing to perform, if everything was broken and burning on fire, would we be like, yeah, but they're just corrupt and they're bad and they're just never going to do anything good, so let's vote in more people? Or would we take the responsibility to either fire and replace them and do better? We the people need to understand that these people work for us, and there's a lot of people in our generation that are like, yeah, but that's the way it's always been, you're never going to clean it up. I can turn a blind eye to, unfortunately, a lot of bad things going on in the world today because it just is so overwhelming. However, I refuse to be the generation that allows this to continue. I know for sure it will be our generation that will end this. We will not sit by and allow this to continue and be like, oh no, they have better things to do. Let's make excuses for why they're not even making sounds with their mouth. They're scared. That one's actually one of my favorite. People tell me, oh, XYZ politician tried, but they blocked him. It's scary. He's fearing for his safety. And I'm like, oh, I'm a petite, smiley female making lots of noises with my mouth about this. Come tell me that it's scary, right? Not the guys with Secret Service. I should be the one that's too afraid of the dark. Here's the thing: as grown-ass adults, we don't get to stand in the corner and pretend like this is going to go away if we ignore it. We get to turn on the lights. We get to overpower this darkness with light. We don't win this with fear.
I'm going to make a
Exactly. Like me, Kim, like last year when I went to DC, I went to every office, sometimes multiple times. I got in front of these legislators. I asked them some questions. Like, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of. I was in front of another congressman's office. I asked him directly. I was like, what can we do to help you out better? He was like, oh, we're doing everything we can to do this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Who is in your intelligence circles that's giving you this information? That's the stuff that really irritate me, especially in our political spectrum, because you got all these gatekeepers, these people, that the staffers, those types of people that, you know, they don't believe that it'll make good political points or whatever for the staffer or the congressman or senator they're working for. So they kind of, play it off a bit, but there are some really good staffers there that are doing some things.
So couple questions, and this is something that will need to be researched. But if there are only 10 high-ranking politicians, senators, or congressmen that are discussing this openly, I would make a wild guess and do a correlation that would lead me to believe that those 10 individuals have not taken $1 from AIPAC. I would also go so far as to make the assumption that all of the politicians who refuse to acknowledge this, will not mention it, will not utter a word, are large recipients from AIPAC. I also have seen a lot of evidence stating that the individuals that receive significant money from AIPAC actually are assigned an individual AIPAC handler that gives them regular talking points.
I don't disagree with you. And I also think that there are various ways that people are either kept silent or choose to do nothing. That's either benefiting from it directly, whether it be financially or otherwise, and or, bribed, blackmail, silence, etc. by other means. I just want people to realize how unacceptable it is. I want to further unpack how these public servants that are, again, funded by our tax dollars have zero excuse to do nothing. Most of what they've set out to do is, they are supposed to not only protect and serve, they are supposed to specifically protect the innocent. If they're not even pretending to protect children, if they're too cowardly and corrupt to even pretend to protect children, I'm done making excuses for these people, and we should not continue to make excuses for them. But then we get back to the then what question. So if not them, what are we, the people, prepared to do? Now, a big way that we can change this is, quite frankly, by making it, this is me being a realist, a profit-driven incentive. So as you know, I'm working with various tech giants, as well as law enforcement, as well as various experts that are needed in the spaces of child protection to come together, not only to create a more cohesive dialogue, streamlining processes so that things actually make sense, so that there are protocols in place. Say this a little bit sarcastically, because shouldn't they already be there? And why am I the one putting them in there? But here we are anyway. Now let's look at our politicians. Why are we allowing them to get away with this? And what are we prepared to do to change that? So, for example, with these tech giants, they have the ability to implement technology that safeguards children. The same technology that they use to identify those words or key phrases that they don't like that we posted or private message to our friends, that same community guidelines violation, the technology that identifies that should absolutely identify when I'm undercover pretending to be a 12-year-old child talking to hundreds of predators that are saying the most vile, descriptive, disgusting things. but they don't block those people, right? That doesn't violate their community guidelines. So let's play stupid as hard as we can and narrow it down to this. Unfortunately, there's no money in protecting children. And there's a lot of money in exploiting children, as well as all the symptoms that that causes. You know, the saying, hurt people hurt people. There's a lot of hurt people hurting people in society today. There's a lot of symptoms of that, be it mental health and other types of insecurity, be it medical procedures, be it legislation and other things that unfortunately benefits people. So how do we make protecting children a profit-driven incentive? Let me run a hypothetical by you. This is one of those things a lot of people don't understand. When we're looking at content on the internet that is inappropriate for children, a lot of times the adult content spaces get that type of attention and people say, take it down, it's bad. While I'm not here to advocate for adult content, I have done extensive investigations into what are the real problems and what are the real solutions. So, for example, when we're implementing these Band-Aid bills, like age verification laws, they only target adult content platforms and require age verification. So again, I'm not opposed to that, but Google Images actually has more adult content than the largest adult content platforms. Pause. What? So are these regulations even accounting for the biggest offenders, or the fact that the largest adult content platforms have implemented safeguards that require you to verify your age and make sure it's consensual and all these different steps to make sure that their content, whether or not you agree with it, that their content is legal and consensual. However, on Google Images, you can search for and find content you are not allowed to even search for on the largest adult content websites. So, with these bills that I call Band-Aids that are not actually solving problems, if the public knew that, for example, the adult content industry, the porn industry, has invented and implemented technology that has eradicated child sex abuse material. Per NCMEC's 2023 report and per the DOJ's 30-month investigation, for example, a company called ALO, which owns Pornhub and all the largest adult content platforms, they had 0 child sex abuse content identified in 2023. Now compare that to, guess which the biggest offenders are? Facebook had 17.5 million, followed by Instagram, which had 15 point something million, followed by Google, which had 13 point something, followed by WhatsApp. Tell me to my face, these are public, family-friendly platforms that don't get the same type of scrutiny that these adult platform contents get. And these Band-Aid bills don't apply to them. So, long story short, how do we make that a profit-driven incentive? Hypothetically, if you knew that Bing Images or XYZ search engine had eradicated child sex abuse material, was requiring content consent forms for every piece of adult content shown, and required ongoing consent as well as other safeguards that I could recommend, would you or would you not gravitate away from Google and towards XYZ search engine that was doing the right thing? That's how we affect their profits. That's how we get them to care enough to do the right thing, because you can't tell me to my face they're not aware. Let's not even, but I'm willing to play stupid and smile and wave and present politicians with this packaged solution with a bow in it that they can take credit for, as well as incentivize tech companies to do the right thing and make it a profit-driven incentive, because all I care about is the outcome, not the credit. However, I am unwilling to play stupid that hard and make excuses for the politicians and the tech giants who could be doing better, but unfortunately are not yet financially incentivized enough to protect children.
When I talked to Tyler on our podcast, he talked about some of the operations that you guys conduct on Telegram. And the way he described it to me is that you can find a local Telegram group. It's not sexual in nature. The group is just like a local type of meetup group. And you impersonate an adult, would create a fake profile with an AI generated image of a 14-year-old boy or girl. They go into the chat, they start chatting, and as soon as they mention their name, or as soon as someone clicks on their profile image, that individual is hit with a dozen direct messages on Telegram from adult males that are looking for a sexual interaction with that fake child.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's happened in every city and state in America that I've done these undercover operations with. So for the avoidance of doubt, this is best done. Sorry, there's background noise. For the avoidance of doubt, this is best done in conjunction with law enforcement because we don't encourage people to just do this on their own as vigilantes, not only because of the safety risk, but most importantly, because unfortunately, the predator will walk when it comes to prosecution if this is not done the right way. We could sit here and talk about how ridiculous that is. However, the reality is that for these predators to actually go behind bars and stay behind bars, it has to be done correctly. But I'll give you just a glimpse of what it's like because people should know how disgusting it is, how aggressive it is, and the volume that these children experience. So, from the first time I did this up until recently in various states around America, sometimes in these tiny little cities and counties, I use AI to make my face look like a 10 or 12-year-old child, completely innocent, fully clothed, just sitting there, deer in the headlights. Every single time within seconds of just creating a profile with a baby looking face and a name on a social media app, not a dark web app, not a dating app, an app that every child downloads from the App Store and uses to interact with friends and meet new people. Within seconds, I am inundated with the most vile predation you can't imagine, with men coming in saying everything from, hey, cutie, you should have a boyfriend. You're so cute. You're so pretty, to what would you do for $500, to the most vile, aggressive, violent porn, like just things that would be inappropriate for a consenting adult to say to me. Sometimes, often, these are their first messages. Sometimes it starts with hello and then turns into a grooming process where it gets more vile. Often it starts with things children cannot unsee. And that's what I need people to understand. A child's innocence, once taken, cannot be replaced. So hopefully that I'll start from the beginning. So I'm not sure where it cut off, but I was talking about these undercover ops. When did it start freezing?
I mean, you can do that whole part over. So I had
Mm.
mentioned, creating a fake profile, working with law enforcement, impersonating a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, and then joining these local groups like on Snapchat, Telegram, whatever, that are not dating apps. They're not sexual in nature. It's not some meetup, hookup type of thing. It's just like a friend, local friend group type thing.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, this has happened every single time within seconds of just creating a profile on an app that children download from the App Store in order to meet new friends and network with kids their age. I use AI to make my face look 10 or 12 years old. And just within seconds of creating a profile with a picture and a name, there are predators pouring into my DMs with the most vile things you can't imagine. From, hey, cutie, you're so cute. Do you have a boyfriend? To what would you do for $500? All the way up to the most advanced, violent, aggressive things you can't imagine that anyone would say to any consenting adult, much less a child, much less in sometimes their very first message to that child. It is the most horrendous things. I need parents to know how bad it is. I'm not overreacting. I'm being way too chill about this. I specialize in social media. I own an online marketing agency. Never in my life of setting up a new profile or business have I been inundated with the amount of people that I was inundated with when pretending to be a child on the internet. I saw more, we call them harmful images, adult male genitalia in the 2.5 days that I was pretending to be a child on the internet than I have in my entire adult life. I chatted with hundreds of predators within that small time frame that we had working with law enforcement in order to identify and arrest these predators. Now, the sad part, I mean, there's so many layers of this that we could unpack. Unfortunately, in general, law enforcement isn't trained to be able to identify these predators. So often we go undercover to assist them and often even to train them in essentially acting like a child on the internet. So for the avoidance of doubt, I want people to understand there's no entrapment. There's no us flirting with guys on the internet. Like, first of all, ew. Also, we don't have to say anything. We just let them talk. We just post a photo of a child and they come out of the woodwork within seconds saying the most vile things. You can tell how fluent so many of them are in this predation. The things they say, the things they offer, the questions they ask. And you'd be surprised how innocent, how dumb we play, because all you're doing is letting them speak, letting them incriminate themselves. So when I show this to law enforcement, to vetted, veterans in the law enforcement space, it brings these hardened individuals to tears to see what their children in their communities are being inundated with. And again, you cannot return a child's innocence once it is taken. So at the lightest end of the spectrum, if these encounters with these perverts don't turn into a real life in-person encounter, at the very lightest end of the spectrum, you are robbing a child's innocence. You are traumatizing children in ways they cannot necessarily heal from, depending on the severity of the trauma. A lot of these harmful encounters can take place and continue without even physically meeting up with these stranger dangers, because you no longer have to find the stranger in a park. They can target children directly from the privacy of their own homes, from their digital devices. And children are being so encouraged to create this content that is wildly inappropriate for their age range. However, the social pressures that they receive, the incentives they receive for sexualizing themselves on the internet for attention from strangers, it raises their social validation. The more you show and do and dance like an adult, the more followers and likes and these little virtual numbers that mean nothing in the real world, but that means so much to kids these days because the culture incentivizes them to do this, to get attention that way. That's what essentially validates sometimes their self-worth. Mm. So we're teaching children that not only it's okay, but we're showing them how. They're given platforms on which to do this. So when, not if, but when a stranger danger identifies them immediately on the internet and slides into their DMs with, hey, you're so pretty, do you have a boyfriend? What would you do for $500? Most children are not prepared to handle that. And unfortunately, most parents are not preparing children to handle that when they hand them a device that has unlimited, unsupervised access to the internet. So if parents take nothing else away from this conversation, please know this. I am being way too chill about how intense and disgusting this predation is. If you must give your child a phone or internet access, please do not give them unlimited, unsupervised access. At the very least, I'm asking you to use different monitoring apps and software that exists. And I recommend Bark and SpyX only because right now they're the most comprehensive. However, I am developing other tech solutions that are more comprehensive. I recommend Bark and SpyX. Download those apps and please use them, because it's not a matter of if your child will be approached. It's a matter of when and how often and how many. And it is up to us as the parents and as the guardians to not only make sure our children are equipped, which they are not, but also to intervene, also to realize that us protecting children is not violating their privacy. Us looking through their phone, us taking away their phone at night, us making sure they have limited access to only content that's appropriate. That's not being a helicopter parent. That's protecting children in this digital age.
I'm trying to think about where the appetite originates for this type of depravity. And I've been married faithfully to my wife for going on 17 years now. We have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I cried tears of joy at their birth. And I would lay down my life in a fucking heartbeat to save either one of them or my wife. And, I feel like that's how every father or husband should feel about his family. And then I think about this demonic depravity, and I just don't feel like a human being with a heart and soul and morals and a semblance of integrity could ever even remotely fucking consider. Like, number one, you're sexually attracted to a child. You want to rob their innocence and do them irreparable physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional harm that most will never recover from. Like, where the fuck does that type of behavior originate from?
Yes. Where the fuck did it originate from? It's a great question, and I have a very direct answer to that. You have to be evil and psychotic in order to somehow justify and or justify the abuse of a child, to abuse a child. You have to be evil and psychotic. Unless you are those two things, you cannot do it or compute the mind of someone who does that. So let me unpack that. Unfortunately, I was raised by these people, so I understand that psychology very well. Never in a way that would justify it, but in a way that understands there are people that are evil and psychotic to do that for periods of time, even to their own children. Point one, this exists, is not a theory. But point two, how do we reverse engineer that? So let's talk about the psychology of a predator. I want people to understand the patterns because this is part of how we not only create solutions that are actually helpful, but also help to prevent children from experiencing this type of trauma. I rarely make sweeping statements, but this one's always true. 100% of the time, a man or woman who would abuse a child is a weak, pathetic coward. Let's start there. 100% of the time. Why do I say this? Not because I'm trying to be tough, but because I want people to get away from this idea that like, oh no, big scary guy, big scary traffickers, I couldn't possibly do something. If I saw a kid being hurt, oh no, what about my safety? Okay, let's unpack that. I'm not asking anyone to put their own safety at risk. I'm not asking anyone to be Rambo. That's not helpful. I am asking people to understand the characteristics, because when you look at, let's bring this close to home, when you look at your community, your neighbors, and even family and friends, I want you to understand that a characteristic of someone who would abuse a child is that they are, I'm being direct because there's no reason to make this pretty, they're a weak, pathetic coward. They won't have, it's not only about the character as well as the morals, it's about hurt people hurting people. Not that that justifies anything, but they were likely hurt in their childhood or in some earlier years. And instead of choosing to heal, they have chosen to perpetuate that cycle. So now let's also talk about, is there hope? Is there rehabilitation for someone who is evil and psychotic enough to actually abuse a child? Not just have a weird fantasy about it, but actually take that action. Now, I don't believe so, but let me get biblical on this one, okay? When Jesus talked about it 3 times in the Bible, repeated in Mark, Matthew, and John, his immediate recommendation was a millstone. Okay, so I'm with Jesus on that one. He said nothing about peace and love and forgiveness when it came to offending one of these little ones. Offending, not even violating or defiling or something worse. He said it would be better for you to put a millstone around your neck and to drown in the bottom of the sea than for you to offend one of these little ones. I would like to challenge everybody that's afraid to talk about this or making excuses for the elected leaders who won't even talk about this. I would like to challenge everyone who's worried about being too harsh or being a helicopter parent. Let's do what Jesus would have done in this situation specifically. Our laws don't exactly catch up to that. Our social justice system isn't exactly in alignment with that. But us as a society, us as a culture, what if we could make our communities intolerant of people who hurt children? What if every person in their community knew that there were mama bears and dads who were going to take action? We are those type of parents. Not only the ones who call and FaceTime your kid every time they're at some sleepover, not only the ones who vet every person who has access to our children, not only the ones who are not afraid to say something, the ones who will intervene. What if every child knew that? What if every child in your church or your school or sports leagues knew that if any type of stranger danger, funny business, sneaky person activity happened, they could come to you and you would handle it? Not only would you listen and take it seriously, but you would take action. I can't even begin to tell you how empowering that would be for those children who need that strong advocate. I can't even tell you how many children don't even have one safe adult in their life. What if we could change that? So we went back to statistics earlier, and I said that statistics aren't really verifiably accurate, but let's go with what we know. If it's around 1 in 5 children who are sexually abused, what if you could pick 5 children in your life and promise me it won't happen to them? What if you could take them under your wing, whether or not they're related to you? What if you could monitor and invest in 5 children in your community? We as Americans could change that statistic.
I have an app on my phone called Kids Live Safe. And in my industry, when I am working with a client and they are looking to identify a property in a specific area, I always open the app and pull up the map. Certain areas around here have a very high concentration of these red dots. When you click on a red dot, it shows you the name, photo, and crime committed by the sexual predator. And there are thousands. Now, fortunately, in a probably a half-mile radius around where we live, there's none, which is fucking magic. But when you go beyond, when you go over the bridge, when you go on the other side of town, there are little red dots everywhere, and you click on them and you just see these grotesque demons that look like they could never in a million years get a date with an adult female. They are just disgusting. Like you can feel their disgust, like how gross and unkept and their fucking hygiene and they're just disgusting. And it's almost to the point of where there's kind of like a modus operandi. Like they all kind of have this same vibe. And I think when you like look at these individuals enough, you start to kind of see these weird motherfuckers in society, like Costco or wherever the fuck you are. And it's like a spidey sense where it just fucking rubs you the wrong way. And there is a podcast by Mountain Tough where they had a former SEAL on there who was talking about the fact that in an interview, I guess one of these guys was behind bars and he was doing an interview of like what drove him, like how did he select his young victims? He said this one thing. If I identified a father that was not a physical threat, that was a target. And the guy on the SEAL on the podcast, he said, be a fucking threat. Everywhere you go, you put off an energy that says you never fuck with my family or you will pay the ultimate price. And that is what we need to embody because this society has made men weak. It is destroying testosterone. There are microplastics and estrogenic compounds in the food and the water. People are in a daze. They are dazed and confused and weak and soft, and they can't fight. They don't have any rage. They don't get angry. They have given up their masculine power to defend and protect their family and their community as sheepdogs. And that is who we need to be.
1000%. I applaud everything you just said. Another something that sounds too easy, but is so important, a way that you can help your child avoid predation is to empower your child. So, first of all, let's start there. Be that strong parent, be that example, set the standard. Then, how do you empower your child and why? Why is because when, not if, a stranger danger slides into their DM and, hey, you're so beautiful. I've never seen someone so beautiful. You're so special. If that's the first time they've heard that, someone finally understands me and sees me. They're my boyfriend. And now I finally have a place of belonging. A big tactic, it's called grooming. It's a desensitization tactic that predators use to gradually isolate the child, gain their trust, and reduce the predator's risk of being caught. So, how do we reverse engineer that? Empower the child, build up their self-esteem. You tell them as the parent, the caretaker, the household, the family, you're smart, you're intelligent, you got this, you can figure this out, we can do anything. You empower them with that type of strong foundation and with the knowledge of the stranger danger tactics and say, hey, this is how I oversimplify it to my nephews in a way that's obviously age appropriate. They know that their auntie works with good guys who take down bad guys that are trying to find and hurt kids on the internet. So that's why I'm going to look at your internet activity and make sure that it's safe for you. That's why I care about this. That's why I'm going to vet this for you. That's why if anything like this ever happens, if someone ever messages you that you don't know, you need to come tell me, not because I don't want you to have friends or to have fun, but because I need to make sure they're safe for you. There's a lot of people that are, on your game on this profile. You don't know if they're actually a kid. They might have some random username and picture, but let me make sure they're safe for you. And then you can have fun. I need to make sure that whoever you're talking to is safe. I'm going to be looking at what you've been watching on YouTube or, the games you've been playing or whatever. kids should understand why. Not only that you're looking out for them, but why. Another thing I tell mostly the like older kids and teenagers is, especially when their parents have been dealing with that type of rebellion or issues on, internet related activities. And I say, hey, I need you to know something. When I'm pretending to be a 12-year-old on the internet, there's all these different predators being disgusting to me. There's, 300 predators a day saying disgusting, vile things. A lot of times they send me pictures of other kids. A lot of times there are situations where either it's a boyfriend or, some stranger danger that convinces a child to create and send them inappropriate content. That's child sex abuse material. Children are encouraged to create it under the guise of, oh, I'm your boyfriend, or oh, I'll pay you money, or whatever the incentive is. And those images get passed around to the entire school. The friends and the family members, your parents are going to see that. And I need the kid to, because these are real stories. This is not just fear tactics, right? I need the kid to understand the consequences in a way that matters to them. Beyond safety, unfortunately, they have to care about their reputation, what every kid at school is going to think. Do you want your dad seeing those pictures? No. Those get passed around to all the kids' friends at school. Sometimes the kids had to go to different school. Oh my, you need kids to understand the risks, of course, in an age appropriate way. But when you create this content, it's on the internet forever. It exists it's there to stay. And it gets shared, often, assuming without your consent, and it can come back to haunt you. The other thing I tell them is that when I'm in a room with other adults who are pretending to be children on the internet, we're posing as children, and we get, you have to really lower your vibration just to get in the mindset to deal with these disgusting freaks of nature, right? So I get real Tourette'y and like, that's how I handle that shit. Okay, so a lot of times someone comes up with some just bleh, disgusting thing, and you're like, oh, guy just said this, bleh, and someone else would be like, wait a minute, someone told me the same thing, and we'll compare notes, and it's the same predator literally copy pasting the same disgusting things, multitasking with us. So that guy who you think is your boyfriend or who's telling you you're super special, he's probably doing that with 10 to 50 other children right now. So again, speak your child's language, help them understand the risk, and not only the internet's bad, I'm going to take it away, because then they look at you like you're outdated and you just don't get it. You have to relate it to them in a way that really helps them understand why.
How are we wasting the time and the money and 3 meals a day and medical care and internet access and all this bullshit on these individuals and then releasing them back into society with a fucking ankle monitor? Like they're rehabilitated after going to prison?
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, there's often more justice in the prison system for these predators than in our legal system. And point two, to your point, why are we allowing more children to suffer from this harm? Is it possible to rehabilitate these people? I'm going to straight out call them monsters. I don't believe so, but also why would we take that risk? Now, as you can imagine, I have a real problem with society trying to make it pretty, which is another level of this. And why would we even pretend to normalize this, but much less make it pretty? So the concept of, oh, they're not a pedophile, they're a minor attracted person, bitch. How insensitive could you possibly be to every single victim of every type of rape to try to make a prettier term for it? Can you imagine? Put that, like, translate that to the adult world of rape victims. Why would we try to make rape some sort of pretty term? Why would we find a place in our society where these people feel included? Fuck no. Our job as citizens, as people, as Americans, is to be intolerant of this. So that's why I was saying, imagine if our politicians won't, if our legal system isn't quite there, if other things aren't quite, we the people can and must make our communities intolerant. I have this dream. I have this idea that I think could help solve this, because look, this goes much deeper, but I've tried with different communities that I feel have the responsibility to be on the forefront of this fight to protect children. So we've talked about the responsibility of politicians. I will never remove that as the primary, because they are tasked with that job to protect and serve. Then there's law enforcement, then, tech companies, etc. I've targeted specific communities like churches and faith-based communities because I think they should be at the forefront, and I just haven't seen them there as a whole. I think they should be some of the most vocal, and I definitely think they should be leading by example when it comes to the fight to protect children. Now, unfortunately, I have created programs and free things and motivational, yay, let's do it, and checklists, and it just didn't really take off. And I could tell a lot of stories about that, but it wasn't surprising to me, unfortunately, but it was quite disappointing. And I don't think it'd be, what Jesus would do these days. However, the community that will always help, there's two communities that will always help and that have the means: service members and bikers. For whatever reason, those are often, some of the same
I'm
people, but
so glad that you said that. And now it makes sense why there's over 400,000 veterans on the VA waiting list for medical procedures. Maybe that's the reason why there's over 22 veteran suicides every day. And when these individuals go for help at the VA, they're just given 5 different prescriptions of medications you can't pronounce for things that could be easily resolved with other forms of natural medicine. But imagine if we had 1 million veterans that were strong, healthy, put together mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially. They were united as a group, and this was their mission. This problem would be over in a year.
I absolutely believe that. There's also a lot of redemption for a lot of people who have different types of PTSD related guilt and shame and just anguish over things they can't unsee or things they can't undo. There's a lot of purpose, though, in using those skill sets to fight for the innocent. So that's a beautiful thing. And I agree with you. That's a whole nother conversation and the layers to that of, weakening us from the inside. However, when it comes to our communities, I have this pipe dream that if we could implement a We the People type program, and again, we'd have to be vetted and healthy type people in order to, make this work. But what if these bad guys knew that well-trained veterans or service members were to come through their door maybe once a month or a few times a month and do a little wellness check? What if they knew they were being watched? And what if they knew they were not going to get away with it? And even maybe even more importantly, if those children knew there was a good guy coming to their door once a week to check on them. I can't even tell you what that would do for children who don't have one safe adult in their life, who don't know there's an option out there for safety or that anybody cares, and much less is willing to fight for them. Imagine what that could do to reduce the predator's ability to operate.
So they let these individuals out. They give them an ankle monitor. They know where they are, but they have internet access. Why are there not handcuffs on the internet access, or why are they not given a lifetime ban? Like, why are you can have a fucking flip phone. I mean, I don't even want these people on the fucking street to start with, but we live in a
Right.
system where we have to respect the quote unquote rule of law and the justice system and due process and innocent until proven guilty and all this stuff. But if one of these demons knew that if they were caught in the act, their life is over. Their life is over. There's an endless supply of hemp rope. There's an endless supply of trees. Like, it doesn't have to be feet first into a wood chipper, although that sounds fantastic to me. Why not capital punishment every single time so that every time any one of these motherfuckers was going to click that mouse and do something inappropriate, they would pause and be like, oh shit, if I go down this road and I get caught, it's going to be the hemp rope on a live stream and everyone's going to cheer and I'm going to be fucking dead and probably go to hell and then get that done to me for eternity by the devil. So I follow Vitali and a lot of guys on YouTube that track these guys down. And I've probably seen, I don't even know, hundreds of these videos. And not one time was a perp physically intimidating. They are pathetic physically, like they are weak, they are scared, they are not a threat. And the only type of individual that they could prey upon would be a weak, innocent child. So as far as these individuals being some sort of physical threat or intimidating or tough, no, they are the absolute most pathetic individuals in this society. They do not need to be a part of this society. They have foregone their right to exist in a civilized society.
Absolutely agree. I want to add to that, but part of the reason I was talking about, empowering the child is because predators do target vulnerabilities. Now, another reason I call them weak, pathetic cowards is because it's very easy to outsmart and overpower a child. Nobody gets an applause from me, right? Now, to further unpack the characteristics of that weak, pathetic coward, yes, they're hurting. They were somehow, hurt earlier on, which does not justify that continued abuse. However, they crave that sensation of power. What are they ultimately after? It's that quick fix of, haha, I got you, which is why someone might abuse an animal or a child. So my point is that while these weak, pathetic cowards are weak, pathetic cowards, their victims, their targets are vulnerable children. So even as hard as a target as you can make a child, as much as you can train them, as much as you can empower them, which I highly encourage people to do, we just have to realize that children, no matter what, cannot outsmart and overpower a fully grown adult, much less someone who's very strategic and intent on their nasty position. So it always comes down to us as adults doing everything we can, not only with preventative measures and education, but as well as actually stepping in, not assuming that just because our child knows better, that someone can't still take advantage of that because they can physically overpower them. So again, there's multiple layers required in this fight to protect children. And yes, we can talk about the different, legislative needs and the laws and the different things, but we just have to realize that no matter how many laws are in place, it doesn't stop crime, right? Crime is also very organized in a way that continues evolving. Like Tyler was saying, they keep looking for loopholes and ways to get around it. Unfortunately, we also have to recognize how corrupted our justice system and political system has become, where you can buy pretty much anybody on any side of the political aisle with money. And I know this like firsthand. You can buy media, you can buy support, you can buy people looking the other way. And a lot of these things carry on because of how financially incentivized these people in positions of power are. So no matter how many step towards progress that we're working towards and will continue working towards, we just have to realize it's always going to come down to us as the parents, the caretakers, the adults, to be that safe person for our child, to monitor them, to physically intervene when needed, and to do everything we can to help prevent them from experiencing the unimaginable. Then there's a layer of arming them for when something happens. How do we deal with that? It's a very complicated and difficult dynamic for any family to endure. And unfortunately, I've worked with way too many families that are having to navigate that. And unfortunately, in society, there's not a very good infrastructure for that type of support. So we were talking about the injustice when it comes to predators who are caught and then often let go. Too often, the victim is just not even acknowledged. Maybe some form of hopefully therapy is sometimes recommended, but too often the victim is just left to, first of all, go through that traumatizing experience, then have to relive it every day in court and with the public perception and the scrutiny and people treating you differently and all the different weird aspects, the inside things that it does to you. But then there's the what does healing even mean aspect of it. When it comes to childhood trauma, and again, a spectrum of intensity of how badly, how long it lasted, how often it happened, who was it, do you still deal with that person in your life or in your family, what type of damage has been done. So we can talk about healing because that's an entirely different TED Talk, but I am very strong on that because as someone who endured 20 years of unimaginable abuse and trauma, including trafficking, I'm big on this issue of healing is still a choice. Now, that sounds sometimes very harsh, but I'm allowed to say it because hopefully I can inspire people that just because you were broken doesn't mean it can't be repaired. And I even prefer the word disconnected. Words matter to me, and it's less about words, it's more about the mindset of it. As a child, when bad things happen to you, it's never your fault. There's never something you could have done to avoid that big adult. A child can see that adult as big, scary, tough, because to a child, that person is overwhelmingly going to overpower them. You could have done nothing to avoid that. It was not your fault. You should have been protected. There should have been safe people there for you. Sorry that happened. It's never okay. Let's validate the fact that that's not okay. Let's not try to make it pretty. Let's not try to be like, yeah, but God has a plan for you. We could go deep into that subject because it's a whole extensive one. But the message I want people to understand is that as a child, when bad things happen to you, it's not your fault. You're not broken. You were disconnected. This is how I oversimplify something that's quite complex. We were intentionally disconnected. Now we can choose to heal. That doesn't make it easy. That's not a quick fix process. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's pretty. And I'm letting you know it's possible. Now that puts the responsibility of healing in our own hands. That puts the power back within our own hands. It also means you don't need to wait for the people who broke you to fix you or to apologize perfectly. It means I get to choose to heal. So the step one is the validation of that bad thing happened. It was not your fault. It was bad. No one's okay with it. That's straight up evil. Let's validate the fact that it happened and that it was bad. Unfortunately, a lot of people fail to do that. Making it pretty is not helpful. Once you validate the fact that it happened and it was bad, you're not crazy. That's not just something you're making up. Now you can decide, and now what? Yes, that happened. Yes, I was born and raised in an international cult and I experienced abuse every day of my life, including trafficking. There was 25,000 other children. Like, let's validate the fact that this is not okay. And I can still choose to heal. It doesn't matter that they chose to disconnect me. I can choose to reconnect to myself, to God, to others. I can choose to heal. I can choose to not allow that bad thing to affect my day to day, to affect my mood or my dreams or my relationships or the way that I view life. I can choose to heal, which is a process. It's not a linear start and end and finish line and yay. Unfortunately, it is an ongoing process. And it doesn't have to be this suffering and sadness. It can actually be a really beautiful thing when you choose to alchemize your pain into power, when you choose to really let it make you who you're meant to be, when you choose to propel it to let you fight back. I think that everybody who's been through some sort of terrible thing, while again, I'm validating the fact that it's terrible, no child should ever experience it. I'm not trying to say like it's a beautiful thing. I'm saying it's terrible. No one should experience it. And if you're pissed off, I think you're meant to fight. I know that I was made to go through those things. Maybe I even chose to go through those things as a child to not only prepare me, but to educate me, because there are people that evil and psychotic enough to bear children and raise them in that environment. Because there are people who will do that every single day to a child and call it God's highest will. Because there are people that are pretending to be part of the solution that are actually part of the evil. Because there are people getting away with it by saying, yay, God, we love Jesus. And then people look the other way. Because there are politicians that are that corrupt that will allow 25,000 American children to be trafficked and born and raised all over the world because the legal justice system is not just. Because there are pieces to this puzzle that are intentionally not included in the equation because they don't want to solve these problems. Because you can't call this a theory to my face. I know I was meant to not only endure those things, but to overcome them and hopefully to exist as an example to other people that if little petite smiley me can be eradicating darkness with this little light of mine, then what's everyone else's excuse not to talk about this, not to join the fight? Because children deserve those safe adults, and how dare we allow our fear to hold us back from getting involved and from protecting children?
That little light you speak of is not a little candle. It is a fucking forest fire. And I think it is beautiful. I think you are wonderful. I think you are such a ray of sunshine in this fucking dark landscape that we are all trying to navigate to uncover all of this. And I'm just so thankful that there's someone like you out there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to
Yeah.
acknowledge you for being one of the few people that are willing to talk about this. I know that's kind of a pathetic thing to even acknowledge, but I want to thank you because many platforms are afraid to even have these conversations. We know that a lot of the algorithmic values don't work in our favor when we talk about the truth. If children aren't worth speaking up for, then what is? What else in our society is more worthy of us stepping in? There are a lot of bad things happening all around the world, but here's the way I look at it. I'm not even a parent, and I don't need to be in order to care about this. I'm not out here fighting for myself. I'm fighting for everybody's children. I'm fighting because fuck this bullshit, because our generation will end this. This is not acceptable. Under no circumstances will we just smile and wave and watch this continue while we make excuses for the elected officials that are profiting off this intentional exploitation. And over my dead body will my niece grow up in the world that I have experienced while pretending to be a child on the internet. These are solvable problems. I need people to understand that. I also need people to know I'm not asking them to get off their couch and risk their life. I'm not asking them to dedicate their entire life or risk their freedom. I'm not asking them to play the hero. I'm asking them not to sit there and do nothing. So I'm asking them to pick one thing that they can do today and start doing something that's meaningful. I'm asking you to start at home. I'm asking you to protect your own children. I'm asking them to pick 5 children that they can mentor and protect, because I promise you we could change this dynamic within the next few years.
That's
Yeah,
what that's what we're going to do.
I think so. Hey, Kim, how can people follow you? That way, they can check you out and see what your business is about and support your organization.
I appreciate it. My nonprofit is Digital Defenders United. You can find a lot of free resources and educational content on digitaldefendersunited.org. We have a lot of internet safety tips. We have recommended apps and monitoring software that parents should be using, as well as apps that should never be on your kid's phone, as well as a lot of ways you can communicate with them and explain the risks. You can also follow us on social media. I have a podcast and I do a lot of content, not only to expose what the problems are, but also to interview the experts and bring in people from different sectors that are needed in these discussions so that we can really work together for tangible solutions. So I appreciate your support and I appreciate you having me on here today. Like I said, there's not a lot of people that are willing to have these hard conversations, but it's people like us that are here to change that.